Neil nearly caught fire. You're going to see some quite exciting things, and also, I hope, learn something about the chemistry of this really interesting element. It's played a big role in my life, particularly in my research, ever since I've been a schoolboy. Chromium is element number 24 in the middle of the so-called transition metals in the first row. It was first discovered, or rather its first compounds were discovered in the middle of the 18th century in mines in the Ural Mountains in eastern Russia. One of the minerals that was discovered was a very bright yellow pigment, lead chromate. You can make it in the lab by dropping ammonium dichromate, and we'll show you another interesting reaction of that later, dropping a solution of ammonium dichromate, which is orange, into a beaker containing lead acetate, which is colourless, well, slightly cloudy. And you get this fantastically bright yellow precipitate formed. It used to be called chrome yellow and be used as a paint. Now people don't really want to use lead salts in paints, but you can still see this terrific colour. It's important to say that even for chemists like me, to see this reaction yet again is really exciting, and particularly because the formation in the beaker is governed by the swirling of the liquid and the mixing, and you see really beautiful patterns, and it always gives me a thrill. Then in the later 18th century, a French chemist, Louis Vauquelin, discovered that you could convert chrome yellow into an oxide of chromium, chromium trioxide, by treating it with acid. Later, he reacted this oxide with hydrogen to make chromium metal and discovered the element. I think it's just worth mentioning that the reason that so many elements were discovered at the end of the 18th century, beginning of the 19th century, is that's when the idea, or the modern idea of chemical elements was first formulated. So before then, people were not looking for chemical elements, and once the idea was formulated, a whole mass of elements were found relatively quickly. While we're talking about chromium trioxide, it's one of my favourite compounds. You may have seen an earlier video where I set off all the fire alarms in the chemistry department by mistake with chromium trioxide and ethanol.
Is the smoke alarm off?
Yeah. No. They were meant to put it off. You forgot to switch it off. Cameras have got better, and I persuaded Neil to try this reaction himself. You pour ethanol, which is a compound of carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, onto chromium trioxide, which is a compound of chromium where the chromium has given all its electrons to the oxygen. It is a very powerful oxidizing agent. It makes things burn, and it really made the ethanol burn. Poor Neil's beaker caught fire. He should have known, perhaps, that it would. If he'd watched my video, he would have got the warning. The reaction not only produces flames, but it converts the chromium trioxide into a different oxide of chromium, where there are some electrons on the chromium, and it is bright green.